So thanks everyone for taking some time out of your day to spend with us talking about housing in Camas. Um, Before we start, a quick overview about using Zoom. Let's see. Here we go. You should be able to change the name that shows up under your box by going to that participants button and clicking on your name and then going to more and doing rename. As we go through the meeting, we'll start with a brief presentation, so kind of keep the participants on mute. But if you have a question or a comment, use that raise hand button, and then one of our co-hosts will invite you to unmute yourself and ask your question or give your comment. And we're also using the chat feature, so if you have questions or comments that you want to share in writing, feel free to add them there. If anybody is calling from their phone, just calling in rather than using it as an app, you can use *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute yourself. With that, I will turn it over to Sarah for an introduction.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is one of our, well, we had a meeting last night too that was open to the public, and today's our second meeting. So I'm really glad that you've joined us on this kind of inaugural meetings of our housing action plan that will really help us gather information that we need on our city to better understand the housing, existing housing conditions and what our citizens really view as the type of housing that's more needed in our community, along with hopefully sticking with us throughout this journey to help us perhaps create some or adapt some of our regulations to better meet those needs in the future. We also, just to mention, this is all part of a grant that was offered to cities throughout the state through House Bill 1923 last summer. That House bill was in a response to the state doing a study that they published earlier in the year that really showed the lack of affordable housing throughout our state. And one of the causes for the lack of affordable housing is that most of our communities have mostly single family housing. Most of our communities are about 70% zoned for single family housing, and that's what's been built as well. And so the state really wanted to create a whole suite of incentives for cities to adopt some changes that will really bring a little more diversity in housing size and price range into our communities. So thank you for joining us, and I'll turn it back over to the team.
Thanks. Let's see. And a quick introduction. I'm Melissa Mayu with Mosaic Community Planning, and we're a consulting firm that's helping the city with this project. And in some of these boxes that you see in Zoom are a few other Mosaic team members who will be helping to facilitate the meeting, and you'll get a chance to talk with them a little bit more once we break out into smaller groups. Let's see. I'd like to start with we can do some introductions once we break into small groups, but I'm trying to pull up. Here we go. I wanted to do a quick poll to see who is in our audience today. If you don't mind answering these questions really quickly, we'll get a bit of a sense of why you're here or how you heard about the meeting. Got some votes happening. All right, so we've got most everyone here is an interested resident. That's what brought you here today. Like Sarah said, we did a meeting last night, and that was a little bit more diverse there. We had some housing industry folks. So glad to hear that we have some residents today. And in terms of hearing about the meeting, looks like social media was the more popular way of getting that out. Let's see. You can see those results there. Well, thanks. So a lot of the meeting today will really be a discussion, hearing from you all about what you see as kind of the biggest housing needs here, thinking about the future for the city. What would you like to see housing look like 10 years from now? But we'll start with a little bit of an overview of the plan itself and a few slides of information about housing costs and what type of housing has been built, just to get you thinking about some of those topics. So as Sarah mentioned, really the kind of driving idea behind this plan is to encourage housing diversity, affordability, and access to opportunity for people of all incomes. So that may be thinking about residents who currently live in Camas, kind of what are their needs for housing going to be in the future? How might they change from what they are today? What about future residents or people who work here? Maybe they're currently not able to live in the city because there's not housing they can afford, or maybe there's not housing of the particular type that they're looking for. So how do we help address some of those needs? In terms of what the plan will contain and kind of what the core research will be, we'll be gathering a lot of data about the existing housing stock, what's been built kind of to date, and what kind of construction is happening now. What do those trends look like? What are housing costs? What areas of the city is construction occurring in? Things like that. We'll also be doing a pretty deep socioeconomic analysis, so kind of based on incomes and population growth rates, what does the need for housing look like in the future? Coupled with that is going to be a public participation process, and you joining us today is one part of that. We did another meeting similar to this last night. We'll also be doing some focus groups with some kind of targeted stakeholders and some members of the public that represent specific groups, so folks like seniors or maybe people with disabilities, people that we know have some particular housing needs that we want to make sure are incorporated into this plan. Other components, we'll be looking at what are the existing housing resources and what kind of policies and zoning does the city have now? How are those working to meet the needs of folks here, or how might those need to be changed to better work for the city? And then coming out of that research will be some specific strategies that the city can plan to take now and over the next 10 years to meet the housing needs of everyone here. Based on that, this will be adopted by City Council and kind of some of those changes implemented. The project will help further the city's comprehensive plan goals and also provide some data for its next comprehensive plan as kind of those updates are made. And as Sarah mentioned, this is funded through a grant from the State Department of Commerce. So there are other cities in the region too doing plans, or in the state doing plans similar to this. Let's see, a quick kind of overview of the process. So right now and through the next month or so, we're going to be doing that existing conditions review and hearing from people. And then towards the end of the year, working more on the draft, on kind of developing some action plan strategies to present to the community in early 2021 for refinements and feedback for eventual adoption by City Council by June of 2021. Let's see. I will stop there for a minute and ask if there are any questions about the plan or the process that we're using that you have kind of initially.
I see a hand. Brandy, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Thank you. I was just curious what the time frame was. This always planned for the project kickoff to be now during this time, or what? How did this time frame come up?
So this time frame is somewhat set by the state in that the plan will have to be adopted by June of 2021. I think our kickoff was a bit impacted by COVID, a bit of a delay in getting started on it. Sarah, I don't know if you want to share anything else about that, or?
Sure. Our city was awarded the grant in December. We actually signed all the agreements to accept the grant award, and then we went out for an RFP to select a consultant in January and February timeframe. And when March came around, we'd selected Mosaic as our consultants, and the council needed to approve the contract, which was the first meeting of March, and then the next meeting, everything was shut down for COVID, and so we put this project on hold, just like all of our long-range projects, because of the governor's orders not to move forward with anything, any government business that wasn't directly related to responding to the COVID crisis. And so it wasn't until July that we really got the green light from our city attorneys and our city leadership that we can move forward with some of our other projects that weren't COVID related in the remote environment that we are today. So it looks a little different, but the state didn't push off the deadline for this plan either. They still want us to finish it by next June. So I hope that answers your question.
That does. Thank you. Thank you.
Just a reminder, if you're on the phone and wanted to raise your hand, that's *9. There's also a question in the chat. How is this plan connected to or influenced by the Growth Management Act in the state of Washington?
Sarah, do you want to answer that? You look like you were nodding.
Sure. So the Growth Management Act being the umbrella for all of our planning in the state, our comprehensive plan has to be consistent with the 14 goals in the Growth Management Act. And so if you look at our city's comprehensive plan, which is available online, you'll see that we have it organized by the Growth Management Act goals. So we have a housing goal and a land use goal and economic development goals. All of those goals are really organized to show how we're consistent with the Growth Management Act, but we're also allowed to have, some local uniqueness to some of these areas as well. And so, yes, it's definitely consistent with the Growth Management Act, but it's also this work that we're doing needs to be very unique and respond to our local conditions as well.
Okay. That's all that I see looking to speak right now. We will break out into groups in just a few more minutes, and they'll have plenty of opportunity to talk and discuss in those.
Yes. So before doing that, I'll show some slides pretty quickly with some data about housing characteristics in Camas. We'll have these slides available in the breakout sessions too. So if you don't have a chance to fully digest them right now, that's okay. So this first one is looking at kind of the structure type and tenure for the city. So you can see right now, and as residents, this is probably not any surprise to you, that the majority of the city is single family detached units. That's about 84%. What we typically think of as multifamily, those kind of 5 units or more, are about 5% or so of the city. So you can see that there's really predominance for single family or duplex, triplex, quads, those type of units. In terms of tenure, most of the city is owner-occupied housing, which I think is pretty consistent with a lot of cities in that area. Also, looking at this number is not shown on that slide, but comparing your number of occupied units to the total units, so kind of the occupancy rate, that number is pretty high. I think it was 96% or so. So you're looking at kind of a pretty tight housing market in the city. In terms of development trends, this bar graph is taken from the city's most recent comp plan, kind of looking at what size of units have been constructed or permitted. And you can see that in 2015, the definite majority of those were over 2,000 square feet, the largest group being over 3,000 square feet. Since that comp plan, we looked at the number of units that have been approved, and that was about 1,800 single-family units and 700 or 646 multifamily. So that turns out to about 73% single-family. So maybe a little bit more multifamily housing than permitted in recent years. And these are units that may have been constructed or maybe under constructed or planning for construction. They've been approved, not necessarily built yet. And then lastly, this figure is looking at rental housing affordability. So these figures are for Clark County overall. Those housing cost estimates are kind of based on some standards that HUD uses, specifically for Clark County. So about $1,289 is their estimate of what an average one-bedroom unit would be in the county. And you can see that that translates to an income of about $51,500 in order for that to be affordable. So that means that you wouldn't be spending more than 30% of your income on housing. That income translates to a job that pays $25 an hour if you're working 40 hours. But you can see that as you start looking at jobs that are paying less than that, the minimum wage or the average renter wage in the county, that number of hours that you'd have to work increases. And certainly by the time you get to a 3-bedroom unit, you are looking at, if you're making kind of the average renter cost, or excuse me, renter wage, about 100 hours a week in terms of work time to afford that unit. So it kind of gives you a sense of affordability for an average unit here. And obviously those rental rates will vary a little bit depending on the property that you're looking at, but those are some standards that HUD uses to look at this question. So I know that you all probably do have some reaction to that data and some thoughts about it, and we will discuss those kind of in breakout groups. But before getting to those, we had another quick poll. Let's see.
Here, I'll put that one up. Okay, you should see the poll question now. The statement is, Camas needs greater variety in terms of housing types and prices. And what we're asking here at this question is, to what degree do you agree with that statement? Okay. I think that everybody that was able to participate has had a chance to. So you see there the results are pretty evenly split, but all toward the agree end of the spectrum. 2 of you strongly agree, a couple that somewhat agree, and then a couple that are more ambivalent, neither agree or disagree. So we want to talk some more about your responses to that, and that's something that we will do in the breakouts as well. And we can talk more about why you chose the answer that you did. Melissa's putting those or assigning us into our groups now. And so in just a minute, you should get a window appear asking you to join a breakout group. And so when that pops up, you can click join. And then there'll be a facilitator or 2 from our group to guide you in that discussion.
Yeah, based on the size of the meeting, I'm going to put us into 2 groups. So we'll have a couple of facilitators in each. And you should see that pop up. Welcome back, everybody. I hope you were able to have some good discussions within your breakout groups. So I know normally at a meeting like this, we would spend some time afterwards going around talking about the discussions from each. But instead of doing that, what we will be doing is, taking the notes that we have from them and putting them up on the project website, letstalkcamashousing.us. So if you would like to see the notes that were from your group or from the other group or from our meeting last night, what those breakout groups talked about, you could go there. They should be up. We'll work on putting them up so that they're are ready by the beginning of next week. You could see what folks said. If you have thought of something else, there'll be some opportunity to provide that input as well, so that we can kind of keep this a continuing conversation. And if there are friends, neighbors, relatives that you know of who would be interested in this project and you think would have something to say about it, let them know that website too, because it's open to everyone in the community. We'll have a survey up there next week and kind of some continuing conversations throughout this project. Also, if you want to get updates about the project, you can register there. One of the questions when you do that is, do you want to receive some email updates? And if you click yes to that, then you will hear kind of updates as we go along and when there's a draft available for residents to take a look at and how you could comment on that, participate in future meetings, things like that. Let's see. Before we go, we had one other poll that I wanted to put up. Let's see if I can grab it. Here we go. About kind of what do you think when you're thinking of how Camas should approach its housing needs in the future? Are there actions the city needs to take on that issue? Do they have tools available to address it? Give a couple more seconds for that.
So none of those fit what I'd be thinking. So I don't want to choose one.
Okay, sure.
That's why I'm just sitting here. I'm just going to sit here and stare at you.
Fair.
Okay, thank you.
So you can see there that most of the people here today said that they think Camas does have some tools and resources available for this, but needs to make better use of them to address housing issues. So, and one person says we need some new ideas there. Well, great. We really thank all of you. Let's see, I could share these. We really thank all of you for your inputs, for your time today. And again, if you want to stay engaged with the project, please go to check out that website, and you can see kind of the videos from the first part of this meeting and input that we got so far, and continue to be part of the conversation. And Sarah, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add in closing. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.